Good day, American government students. Matt Lees here, and folks, we're getting ready to jump into Module 3 already. Believe it or not, we're kind of crawling closer to midterm. So without any further ado, I thought I would jump into this week's tests and assignments, kind of unpack those a little bit for you. This week's a little bit different in terms of the structure of the modules. So let me go ahead and dive into that for you. As usual on the home page, go ahead and click on modules. You'll come down here to module 3. You'll notice, unlike previous weeks, we actually have two different types of tests. We have the chapter 4 and 5 tests, which you're accustomed to. That's the multiple choice test. Then we have an essay test for the first time. So as usual, you want to click on the summary and guide, which is going to give you this little thumbnail in terms of American government politics today, chapters 4 and 5, the readings. Founding Brothers, don't forget that that analytical paper is approaching. I know it seems like module 6 is a million years away, but April is going to be here before we know it. Temperatures are starting to climb. It's going to be 60 degrees today, which is going to be fantastic. But don't procrastinate on that, because reading can be a challenge under the best of conditions. But when you procrastinate, it makes it even more challenging. So don't forget about Founding Brothers. Continue to read that as we progress. But as usual, always start down here with Module 3 handouts. And I'm gonna hit on this again this week. But those learning objectives as you're reading chapters 4 and 5, have these in front of you. Use them to help identify those answers within your textbook, because when you go to take your test, I usually based a number of questions based off of these objectives and off your key terms. So just a reminder to keep in mind, if you're not doing well on the multiple choice test, that's a simple way of improving your performance on that. I do have some notes here that can give you just a little bit more kind of a different perspective than what your textbook provides. So I recommend reading those as well. In terms of, I do want to talk about the essay test, which is different this week. This will be the only essay test this semester. But there's two potential questions. Only one is going to actually appear on the test. My recommendation would be to go ahead and do these in advance. Prepare your answers in advance versus, you could, if you wanted to, roll the dice. Just click on it and see which question you get. But my recommendation would be to go ahead and prepare full essay answers for both of those. And that way, it's in Word. You just cut and paste it into your test, and you're not having to worry about crafting an essay with that limited hour and 10 minutes that you have on the test. So my recommendation would be to research this. You feel free to use not just your textbook, but also outside professional sources. The first one really relates to what we're covering in this chapter, which is the Bill of Rights. First 10 amendments, obviously, as you know, from reading your textbook and from your 8th grade civics. Select one of the Bill of Rights, one of those first 10 amendments that you think is the most critical to our freedoms. Tell me why, from your perspective, it's the most critical. Most importantly, be able to unpack what's contained within that amendment. Which specific provisions are contained, which clauses, which freedoms, and then tell me, in essence, an original argument, why did you select it? Why do you think it's the most critical? So if you select the First Amendment, which a number of students do, and I'm not trying to dissuade you from doing that, but make sure you list those. If you select the First Amendment, those 5 big freedoms. Give me just a little bit of a thumbnail in terms of how each of those can be critical to our lives as citizens, as Americans. We also see what's kind of unfolding in Canada these days. Feel free to incorporate current events, recent events into your essay, and give me that original argument. Why is it critical? Use also one court case to kind of illustrate how the court today has interpreted some of these freedoms. So your text, American Government Politics Today, has a whole series of cases that relate to these various amendments. So give me enough, again, as you're writing this, assume that the reader knows nothing about these amendments, nothing about your court case. Give the reader enough to be able to understand these concepts without any prior knowledge. So that will give me a lot of good detail that I'm looking for there on those essay tests. So I want to talk about that a little bit more in depth because we haven't done that thus far this semester. So I'm looking for a little writing. I will also give you detailed feedback. There's some essay guidelines. The number one guideline is make sure you do this in advance. Don't plagiarize. Don't cut and paste directly from outside sources, your textbook. It's okay to use outside sources. Totally okay. I encourage you to do so because it'll actually help round out your knowledge. Just make sure that if it's a direct quote, put quotations around it, put the last name of the author and the page number. So it's important that you cite your sources when you do so directly or indirectly. So make sure you do that, and make sure you fully answer the questions. Also use proper grammar, which is a critical piece. So that's the essay. As you scroll down, you'll see that we have our third discussion question. Hopefully this will be the last time I have to use this this question, but this is about a controversial issue, what we've lived with for the last 2 years, which is the COVID-19 epidemic that we faced. There's, of course, lots of public policy consequences and recommendations. I've got some op-eds here about whether or not we should move towards what's called vaccine passports. Some states have done this. If you want to go out to a restaurant, if you want to go to a public venue, you have to show that you have the vaccines, you have the vaccinations. And also a number of venues are also requiring not just that, but also a negative test. So read those articles. The first piece is make sure you read these. Give me a little bit of a summary of each one of them. Give me, again, if someone hadn't read these articles, give me enough that someone that hasn't previously been exposed to the issue of vaccine passports or familiar with these articles would be able to understand both by reading your post. Which of the articles did you find to be the most persuasive? Which arguments specifically did you think were the strongest? Which were the weakest? And then finally, give me your opinion. Now, what we've seen, and feel free to talk about this, what we've seen in recent weeks, even here in Illinois, which is, you look at each state, blue states versus red states. One of the brilliant parts of our system is we have federalism, so each state ultimately gets to decide for themselves how they address even things like the COVID-19 pandemic. So you've got Florida and DeSantis, the governor down there, who's basically for the last 2 years has thrown the doors open. Very few mask mandates, no vaccine mandates. They've taken that approach that basically we're going to try to shield the sick and the most vulnerable, but everyone else, we're not going to shut the economy down. We're not going to alter people's lives. We're not going to make kids, school kids, wear these things. Other states like Illinois, like New York, like New Jersey, that have taken a much different approach. They're requiring all of mask mandates and vaccine mandates and testing, those sorts of things. Now, what we've seen the last week or so, as I mentioned earlier, is we're seeing even a shift from blue state governors. So you can talk about that too. Talk about current events and talk about where you stand. Some students are very nervous about sharing their thoughts in the discussion boards. They provide kind of this generic answer that they think I want to hear. Folks, I'll tell you this, I will never, ever grade you on whether or not I agree with you on anything, but I will grade you on the basis and your ability to support your conclusions, to support your arguments with fact from either the articles, from your textbook, or other professional sources. So that's kind of what I'm looking for this week. A little bit of a heavier load than other weeks, but I thought just before the midterm, maybe it's a time to kind of ramp things up just a little bit. So that's kind of where we are this week. If you have any questions, as usual, don't hesitate to reach out to me. And as you can see, as I pointed out, week after week, my door here is always open, literally and figuratively. Stop by and see me, or shoot me an email. Always glad to answer your questions, and I look forward to reading these discussion questions and seeing your take on this. So with all that said, folks, I'll see you all next time.